a lot of motivation besides just financial. And we run into those people all the time. We make it our business to get in front of those people and present an option for them that solves their problem.
If you're a real estate investor and are wondering how to raise and leverage private money to make more profit on every deal, then you're in the right place. On Raising Private Money, we'll speak with new and seasoned investors to dissect their deals and extract the best tips and strategies to help you get the money, because the money comes first. Now here's your host, Jay Conner.
Welcome to another amazing episode of Raising Private Money. I'm Jay Conner, the Private Money Authority, and your host. And today I have got a dear friend, longtime associate that goes back 20 years ago. And today we're going to be talking about how to buy properties subject to the existing note, and also how you can combine the strategy of using private money with a subject to deal. We're going to talk about what is sub to, why would people do it, and how it is that my friend and my guest has done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these deals. In fact, over 500 of them. So to go back just a little bit, my guest actually, before he got into real estate, he worked in the restaurant business for almost 20 years. And then in 1999, how many of you listening to this show can remember the name Carlton Sheets when he was offering a nothing down course? And so my friend and guest was watching this late night TV infomercial. Boy, I remember when that was running back in the day. So anyway, my guest ordered it up, read it, took a $5,000 advance from his credit cards to start his real estate investing career. And then exactly 1 year later, he retired from the restaurant business for good and forever. So then for over 10 years, he operated a real estate business where he was wholesaling, rehabbing numerous properties. But then he found his real niche in what he calls sub two. Here's what's interesting. I went to my friend and my guest live event about 20 years ago. I never heard of sub two until I went to his event. And so this is buying subject to existing financing. So bring it current to this year right now. He has done over 500 properties subject to the existing note. And even though he retired in Belize in 2010, he still continues to do this business, buying 20 or 25 properties a year, subject to the existing note in markets throughout the United States. Well, since I first met him 20 years ago, he's written several real estate courses and books. His flagship courses are the Ultimate Sub-2 Guidebook. And he also did a book called Extreme Marketing, the Ultimate Marketing Guidebook. And his Sub-2 Guidebook actually covers every aspect of subject to investing, to marketing, to finding motivated sellers, how to negotiate deals, how to complete the paperwork, and how to market and sell the properties. And then his other publication, Guidebook Extreme Marketing, is it's a marketing manual with literally hundreds of both time-tested and unique out-of-the-box marketing ideas to help you grow your real estate business. Well, I can hardly wait for you to meet my friend, my business associate, and one of my very first mentors 20 years ago. In just a moment, you're going to meet the one and only Mr. William Tingle right after this. So, William, you moved to Belize in 2010, but before we talk about that, I got to say it's so good to see you here on camera from the first time I saw you almost 20 years ago at your live event on Sub-2 deals. I didn't even know what Sub-2 was until I went to your event. I'd been relying on the local bank here to fund my deals. But first of all, William, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much, Jay. I'm so excited to be here. I'm telling you, I'm just hoping I can live up to the introduction there.
Well, you can. Yeah, after I went to your live event all those years ago, I started buying houses Sub-2, and that was before I knew anything about private money. That was before I lost my line of credit. In 2009 is when my line of credit got shut down at the bank, along with the rest of the world. But I mean, this is just fascinating. All these years, you're still doing sub 2 deals.
Man, they're the best. I mean, they're the best because no matter what happens, and like you just said, I mean, something bad happens in the economy. Those of us that were around in 2007, 2008, 2009, the bank, if you're relying on them, they can cut you off. And I can still buy as many houses as I want, as long as I want to. So there's that. That's what really got me started on sub 2.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing we should talk about, just to make sure all of our listeners are on the same page, is what exactly, in simple terms, what does it mean to buy a property? And in your case, most cases, we're talking about buying a single family house, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So you're buying a single family house subject to the existing note or the existing finances. Unpack that in simple terms.
Okay. Well, let's use an example of one that we just did a couple of weeks ago. We go after foreclosures, people that are in foreclosure, the filings at the courthouse, and we make contact with them. And we talked with this young lady. Her name was Abby, and she had bought a house 7 years ago. And she had since gotten a divorce, moved out of the house, bought a new home with her mom. She was living in a different place. The house was vacant. She didn't want this house anymore. She was about 4 months behind on her payments, and with legal fees and everything else, it would take $9,000 to bring the payments current. Now, when Abby bought her house, she signed a bunch of documents at the closing table. But the two main documents that she signed were a deed. Her seller signed the deed giving her title to the house, and she signed a mortgage. She gave a mortgage to the bank guaranteeing she would make the payments or they could take the house back. And as always, our pitch in situations is taking over payments. So she didn't want this house. She said, I just want to get rid of it. I don't want a foreclosure. So we talked to Abby about taking over her payments. She was okay with that. She signed a deed to us, giving us ownership, but we left the mortgage that she had in place, and we just made the payments on that mortgage. We caught her payments up, and we would make those payments moving forward until we sold the house at some point in the future or whatever we wanted to do.
Right. So to summarize what you just said, you have an owner of a property that, in the words that you just said, she just wanted to be done. She wanted to be rid of the property.
Absolutely.
And so she's willing to actually sell you or your entity the property. And she's going to sell it. You're going to take ownership. And she is agreeing to leave the mortgage in her name. So she's not going to own the property anymore, but she's going to leave the mortgage in her name. And in exchange for that, you are agreeing, in this case of a foreclosure, to make her payments, keep her payments current, and bring the past due payments current as well. It sounds to me like in this particular scenario, you're helping rebuild her credit.
That's correct. We cure the default, and we'll make however many payments are necessary. Now, in this case, went a little bit differently. We found a cash buyer that had a lot of equity, and we had a cash buyer right away. But normally, we'll keep those houses and just make the payments for months or years in the future, which will get her credit much improved back from currently when she's in foreclosure. So yes, it does help the seller.
So let's talk about, who are these people? How would you describe these types of sellers that are willing to do this, sell their house, leave the mortgage in their name? So one you just identified in the story you shared, someone facing foreclosure. What other, I mean, when I first heard about sub 2 from you way back when, one of my first questions in my mind was, who in their right mind would agree to this type of, arrangement? Well, you just identified it, somebody facing foreclosure, but what other types of people or scenarios are willing to do this?
Jay, everybody automatically thinks only the most desperate people would do this. But the truth is, there are people in all kinds of situations. In fact, I just had a phone call yesterday with a fella. He's got his house listed on the market right now. It's been listed for 4 months. He's moved out of state. His credit's good. He's not behind on payments, but just a conversation with him and explaining what we do, he's considering it. And I figure he'll probably wind up doing it if he doesn't get a contract on his house in the next month or so before his listing expires. We bought a house last year from a lady who had an 800 credit score, but she needed to move to Little Rock, Arkansas, so she'd be close to the University Hospital if they gave her a call, because she was on a waiting list for a liver transplant. There are people there's a lot of motivation besides just financial. And we run into those people all the time. We make it our business to get in front of those people and present an option for them that solves their problem.
Solves their problem. Solves their problem. Excuse me. That's a powerful phrase. When you say solves their problem, it sounds like you're first discovering where they are, what is their situation, to meet them where they are with that problem. It's been my observation in my business that that's what we are, is we're actually, we're problem solvers. So give us some bullet point, give us some bullet points on how your conversation goes with a potential seller that might sell to you sub 2. What are some of the points or the questions that you would ask them? Like, you got someone that's got an 800 credit score that probably has an option of putting that property in the multiple listing service and listing it with a realtor. What are some of the advantages that you point out to potential sellers of doing business with you in this particular way?
Well, the biggest advantage to doing business with us is that, well, first of all, whatever their problem may be, we can solve it as quickly as they want to get it solved. I've bought houses from people in the past that didn't have an immediate financial need. Maybe they were building a new home and they didn't want to have 2 mortgage payments, because you know how it works when you build a home, Jay. We'll be finished April the 1st, and then April comes and goes. If my seller in that case had listed their house on the MLS and gotten an offer immediately, they may possibly have had to move into an apartment or find some arrangements until their house was complete. Same token, maybe they wouldn't have gotten a contract immediately, and they would have been stuck with 2 mortgage payments when their new home was completed. We're able to get that house under contract, come to an agreement on taking over payments, and move on their timeline whenever their house is complete. So that's the solution for that particular person. I've also told you about the solution for Stacy. We were able to close when she needed to, get her to Little Rock, where she was waiting to sell this house to purchase a new home. Remember, she had an 800 credit score. She could buy a new home right away, get moved to Little Rock. And as a sidebar to this story, within a week of moving there, she got the call. She got her liver transplant. We got an amazing testimonial from her. She said, literally, you guys saved my life. So people in all kinds of circumstances, but you're absolutely right. The deal is in the story. And that's what you've got to get from the people that you talk to. Why are you selling this house? Sounds like a great house. Why do you want to sell it? Well, I'm getting a divorce. Well, I need to move to Little Rock. Well, I'm building a new home. There are all kinds of stories and all kinds of motivations for sellers.
Yeah. So let's suppose you're talking to a seller and they got a great credit score, and let's say they raise, and let's say their payments are current, and they've got some type of motivation, whatever it is, that they want debt relief. They want to get rid of that payment, but they've got a concern. They don't know you. They're just meeting you. They've got a concern that you're actually going to keep those payments current and not, affect their credit score in a negative way. How do you speak to that when and if they bring it up?
Well, if that question comes up, I'm just very to the point about it, Jay. I just say, listen, Mr. Seller, you don't know me. Now, I can provide references for you. Our website has plenty of video testimonials from people that we've dealt with. But the truth is, you don't know if I'll make your payments. Now, a good point to make with some sellers, if you're giving them some cash, especially if it's a substantial amount, is listen, I'm writing you a check for $25,000. I'll lose all of that money and anything else if I don't keep your payments up. So I've got an investment in this property too. This is how we do business, and we've done it this way for over 25 years. So having a good reputation really helps. Having testimonials helps. But I'm very honest with them. I said, listen, we just met, and I can't, there's no way for you to know for certain. And I'll also explain what'll happen to them if we don't make the payment. So we don't skirt around those issues. We're just very blunt with them.
Wow. What I love about what you just said is you're actually speaking the truth. You're not speaking around or trying to skirt around the truth. Here are the facts. And, people really appreciate that. And I mean, that is so powerful, what you just said, William. What you just said really, William, was amazing.
Well, you're not going to get anywhere, trying, I hear these people do that all the time. Oh, well, we would never, no, it's not my intent not to make their payments, but they have to understand the risk involved in this. And the truth is, if I don't make their payments, the bank's going to foreclose and their credit's going to be fried. And we're just very upfront with them. We explain that. And I've had people tell me, listen, my dad told me not to do it. My lawyer told me not to do it. My real estate agent said not do it, but we're going to do it. So,
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you're just upfront and very, very, truthful with people. Now, let's talk about for a moment buying criteria. Now, here's what I mean by that, when I say buying criteria. So I use a lot of private money for paying all cash with houses. And when you're paying all cash, whether it's your own cash or the bank's cash or private lender's cash, when I'm using private money to pay all cash for a property, that buying criteria is very, very different than my buying criteria for subject to the existing note. For example, what I mean by that is if I'm paying all cash, then I use a form of the maximum allowable offer formula, which is after repaired value. Of course, I'm getting it at a discount because it's in distress. That's another thing about these sub 2 houses. Aren't a lot of them in like really good shape and don't need hardly any rehab at all?
Most of the ones we buy today need zero rehab. I mean, they're move-in ready. And you can buy a sub 2 house with not very, you're talking about the MAO formula that you use. And we can buy a house with very little equity, but it may have a 2.5% interest rate loan. So yeah, we can do things a little bit differently.
Yeah. So I want to unpack that for our audience that's tuning in here. So when I pay all cash private money, I'm having to buy at a substantial discount. I got to protect my private lender. I don't want to borrow more than 75% of the after repaired value. So I'm having to pay and buy that property at a much lower price. In contrast to that, you just said there can be very little equity in the house and you can still buy it. So how do you decide if the numbers make sense, if the math makes sense? What are you looking at on a sub 2 deal as to whether it's a pull the trigger for you or a pass on the numbers?
If I'm looking at a house that is in great condition, it can have very little equity. It's got to have just a screaming interest rate on it. And typically we'll buy houses 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%. It's got to be something that's going to let me wrap that note and not have any money in it on the front end, make at least $400, $500, $600 a month in cash flow, and then get a back end over time. And you know how notes work. And because we're going to sell that house at current market rates or just a tad over that. So if I can buy a house that's worth $300, if I can buy it for $280, and you and I know that's a zero equity. By the time they sold it with a realtor, they may even have to write a check. But if I can buy that house for $280 at 3% and wrap that note at $300 or $305 at 7%, then I'm going to get a good strong cash flow and make money on the back end. So we do those all the time. But we also like houses with equity too.
Sure. So I don't want the audience to miss what you just said. What you just said is you are buying these houses, a lot of these houses today, at a 2.5 or a 3% mortgage rate. And I want the audience to understand you're not going out and borrowing money at 2.5 or 3%. You are actually inheriting the interest rate on that existing mortgage. Speak to that for a moment. I want everybody to understand that, because this world of sub two, your credit don't matter. You're not having to qualify for, is the mortgage company even involved in this transaction, the existing mortgage company?
We do contact the mortgage company. We get added as an authorized person to discuss the loan. The seller, we handle that with the seller. But as far as asking the mortgage company, we don't do that. We don't, tell them what we're doing. As far as I'm concerned, it's none of their business. Bank of America made a loan to Bob, and they expect $1,000 a month payment from Bob. And whether Bob's the one writing the check or William's the one writing the check, as long as Bank of America gets their check, that's really all they care about. So we don't ask them about it. We just do it. And we take over the payments that way. And that's how it works for us.
So buying subject to is not assuming a loan, right?
Absolutely not.
So explain, what's the difference? What's an assumption? What's assuming a loan versus subject to?
Well, if I assume Bob's mortgage, I have to fill out a paperwork package and actually qualify with that bank. Now, if Bob bought his house 4 years ago and he's got a 3% mortgage, when I go to assume it, I don't know if the bank's going to let me keep 3% or not. Now, they might or they might not. I guess it depends on the loan that Bob got. But by informally assuming it, just taking over the payments, we keep Bob's mortgage in place that he paid all the closing costs for, that he sweated over, that he filled out the closing package for, and everything else. We don't do any of that. We use about a dozen documents to take over our payments: a deed, a few disclosures, a standard HUD, and some other things. But we don't assume that mortgage. There's no asking the bank for it. We just do it.
Well, you know what's interesting about this world of subject to is that, as you just said, that there's no bank approval involved. And I've heard some real estate investors, when they first hear about sub two, they'll say, wait a minute, I'm not even sure this is legal. And I know you've heard it many, many times over the years. And I think they question why would this be legal or not be legal, because they never heard of such a thing. But if someone were to ask me, Jay, how do you know sub two is legal? I know what my answer is, but let me ask the expert. What's your answer to how do you know this is legal?
Well, Jay, you and I are old enough to remember non-qualifying assumable mortgages. And I actually, believe it or not, in the past 25 years have bought one of those, an old FHA mortgage that was non-qualifying assumable. But what happened in the 80s, when interest rates got up to 20, 21%, banks started putting clauses in their mortgages. They call them due on sale clauses. And basically what it said was, if you transfer an interest in this property without our approval, we can call the loan due and payable. And they started doing that because people were just taking over mortgages at lower interest rates, and they were missing out on a lot of interest income. Well, what you need to know is a due on sale clause isn't, it's not a criminal violation to take over a payment anyway. It's just a mortgage clause. It's just a civil action. They can call the loan due if they want to. So it's not illegal to do it, at least not yet. So that's why we take over payments. There's no due on sale jail.
I love that. Whoa. No due on sale. Well, and along with what you just said, William, first of all, that due on sale clause that you just mentioned. What the due on sale clause says in the mortgages now since the 1980s, it says essentially the mortgage lender has got the right to call the note due, but they don't have the obligation.
Well, read the actual clause in most of the mortgages, Jay. It says the lender may, comma, at its option, comma, call the entire loan due and payable. My goodness. I mean, is that not sort of a wishy-washy sort of, well, when we don't have to do it, we might do it. They don't want to do it. It's just,
Exactly.
I've been doing this 25 years and I've never had a loan call due. Now, I've heard of other ones getting call due, but I can tell you it almost always is for one of two reasons: not making the payments on time and not handling the insurance properly. Those are the two biggest reasons.
Absolutely. Well, and another reason that it's legal, here's what's funny. When I started doing subject to deals after learning from you about it, it's already on the HUD closing statement.
Absolutely.
It's all, I mean, your attorney, your real estate attorney does not have to fabricate anything. Your real estate attorney doesn't have to go to subject to law school to learn about this. It's already there. I think it's line 203, either line 203 or 204.
203 and 205, buyer and
Yeah.
seller side. Yep.
Yeah, right there on the HUD itself. So I do want to speak to this before we run out of time. After all, this podcast is called Raising Private Money. On a lot of my sub two deals, I bought it sub two.
Mhm.
And if it needed renovation, a lot of them don't. If it needed renovation, or if I didn't want to use my own money to bring the payments due, if there's enough equity in the property
Mhm.
to protect the private lender, right? I got to give them enough. I call it an equity spread, equity cushion. Then a lot of times I've borrowed small amounts of private money in second position
Mhm.
underneath that first mortgage position that I bought the property subject to the existing note. And so now we're combining the strategy of buying subject to and the strategy of using private money in second position to where I'm not having to put my hand in my pocket. Have you done any of that, William?
You bet. You bet. I sure did. I got one of my first private lender was actually someone that I bought their house via a sandwich lease option. They had their house listed. They couldn't sell it. And I was a new investor. So, I was trying to find things that work. And I just bought a lease option course and I was doing sandwich lease options. And his house was free and clear. And I bought his house from him. I made payments to him for a couple of years before my buyer exercised their option. And I delivered his check to him. He was an older guy. I delivered his check to him out to his house. And I said, okay, Mr. Smith, what you going to do with that money? And he said, well, what you got in mind? And so I used him for several years in second position on sub two deals where exactly what you said. We didn't have to come out of pocket. And I'll tell you, it's also a great way for people that have smaller retirement accounts that don't have a ton of money in it. To get a really good return on their retirement account. If you need 10,000 or 15 or 20,000 on a deal to bring arrears current or to do a cosmetic rehab, that's a really good way for them to earn money.
Yeah. Well, and what you just said also, William, I don't want people to miss out on, and that is a great time to get private money is when you buy a house all cash from a seller, or you pay off a current private lender. And William, just in case any of our listeners have got to jump off early, I don't want them to miss out on your contact information to learn about this sub two world. And so how can people reach you, William, before I go into my next question?
Sure. Well, the best way to reach me is at our website, sub2deals.com. You can reach us there. And I'll tell you, I've been doing this 25 years. I just released my first book. And if you want a really concise, affordable, easy way to learn a bunch about our business model, buying the nice houses, wrapping the notes, creating passive income, they can check out our book at our website, 12houseblueprintbook.com. That's a really good thing.
Oh, I love it. So again, that's www.the numeral 12.
Mm-hmm.
So 12houseblueprintbook.com. That'll be in the show notes as well. www.12, the numeral 12, houseblueprintbook.com. William, before they get the book, what is the 12 house blueprint?
You know, Jay, the 12 house blueprint is something I put together when I moved out of the country in 2010. I didn't live where I could just drive around and look at houses or see houses. I had to put together a way that worked for me living thousands of miles away to still buy real estate. So what I did was I took a legal pad and I had been rehabbing, I'd wholesaled, I did Section 8 rentals, regular rentals. I did everything. I was sort of a jack of all trades before I left the country. And I said, what I really love about this business, I loved buying sub 2. I loved selling with seller financing and the truly passive income of just creating a note. So we started buying 10 or 15 houses a year. And I just did the math on it. And I said, I can buy a dozen low equity, nice houses every year and sell them on seller financing. And within 3 years, be making $600,000 a year plus. And all of this talk these days about scaling and buying 20 houses a month and flipping all these deals and doing these things, most people that I meet, if they bought just a few houses a year, their life would change so drastically. And as I've gotten older, 12 houses a year is a good number for me. With minimal marketing, you can buy a house a month. And I always joke and say, hey, your grandma can do this. But that's, and I put together that system, and that's what I did for years. And, that's for the most part what we do now. And I've been planning this book for about 6 years. And this past year, I just finally buckled down and did it. And we just wrapped up our pre-launch yesterday. So the book's available. Y'all go check it out. It's not a lot of fluff. I mean, it's almost 200 pages of good stuff.
That is fantastic. William, what you just shared with me and the audience about your new book, that deserves what I call the very sophisticated golf clap that goes just like that.
Thanks so much.
Having you here on the show, we need to celebrate you being on this show, William.
Absolutely.
Well, William, it's been a blast having you on. And one more time, I want to share both of your websites. The first one being www.sub2deals.com. That's SUB, the numeral 2, deals.com. And then for your new book, www.12houseblueprintbook.com. You can't beat $600,000 a year in passive income. William, thank you so much for joining me. So good to see you again.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. It was a blast, and it's good to see you again, Jay. Being around these old timers in the business, man.
You got it, brother. And there you have it, another amazing episode of Raising Private Money. And in order for me to continue to have amazing guests like William Tingle, I need your help. And that is, I need you to subscribe, like, share, give me a 5-star review, write a review. When you do that, I'm able to continue bringing on just brilliant guests like we've had today with William Tingle. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and click that bell so you don't miss out on upcoming episodes. I'm Jay Connor, the Private Money Authority. Looking forward to seeing you right here on the next episode of Raising Private Money.
Are you feeling inspired by the knowledge you gained in this episode? Then head over to jconnor.com/moneyguide. That's jconner.com/moneyguide and download your free guide that shares 7 reasons why private money will skyrocket your real estate investing business right now. Again, that's jconnor.com/moneyguide to get your free guide. We'll see you next time on Raising Private Money with Jay Connor.